Good morning, Kimberley folk. Welcome to a Weather IQ weather update today, looking at the on-the-ground effects of Tropical Cyclone Dianne. This update brought to you by townsvillesheds.com. Today's date is the 29th of the 3rd, 2025. Tropical Cyclone Dianne made landfall as a Category 1 system on the higher end of a Category 1 system, just east of Coolin. And looking at the radar animation, you can see the landfall location just in there and tracking in a general south-southeasterly direction this morning. So that means the system will pass close by but to the east of Derby. So everything we've been talking about so far will verify. And since it won't pass directly over and through King Sound, the expectation will be that that funneling issue will be less of an issue. Certainly for Derby, it'll be less of an issue. Still be a little bit of funneling of a southerly and southwesterly, though, on through King Sound. But for now, it's going to push just to the east of King Sound and just to the east of Derby. Looking at some of our, firstly, some of our lessons. Oh, Browse Island doesn't have any. Firstly, let's have a look at some of our more interesting observation areas. We've had Adele Island, the cyclone passed just to their east, and we had southerlies there that were sustained at about 65 to 70 kilometres an hour, gusting up to about 90 odd kilometres an hour there at Adele Island, and then obviously the very important one of Coolin Island. And we can see here that we actually had sustained winds overnight as the cyclones made landfall of around about 87 kilometres an hour, which puts it just below Category 2. Remember, categories are on wind speeds, not on wind gusts. Wind gusts, it was firmly just in Category 1 range. But wind speeds, it almost justified Category 2 rating there at between 2:03 and 2:13 a.m. with a west-southwesterly sustained at 87. 89 plus is a Category 2. And these guys would have passed through that western edge eye wall, so right next to the eye, or right next to, we can't call it an eye, right next to the centre, but on the western edge of that centre. And so they would have gone through the absolute worst that this thing had to provide. And you can see there that the worst was a marginal Category 1, or high-end Category 1, I should say, marginal Category 2. So that's it. That's as strong as it becomes, and now these observations should start to die down as the cyclone moves inland, barring any squalls that might take place. For those playing at home, Yampi Sound will be a very interesting area to watch with regards to the decaying of the cyclone. So as it comes inland, how high will these winds get at Yampi Sound? And then, of course, we have Derby. Nothing there yet that's too dramatic. Winds gusting up to about 20 odd knots. But we are starting to see the rainfall totals increase fairly quickly now as the cyclone's made landfall and pushes inland. So at the moment, Yampi Sound is just right on the actual forecast track. So that centre should pass basically right over the top of them. If not, it will pass just to their east, which would mean that they would be just like Coolin. They would see the strongest of the strong that the cyclone has to offer. Although, just bearing in mind that now that we're inland, that southerly is going to be muted to some degree. Rightio, AI modelling tells us that the cyclone will continue to move exactly where it is and push in a general southerly direction, basically popping right over the top of Yampi Sound and then pushing just to the east of Derby. Just to the east of Derby. Not by much, just by a few kilometres, but just to the east. That means Derby will find itself in that western flank of the circulation. Now, that western flank for Derby probably isn't going to be anywhere near as intense as Coolin Island because in this situation, we're getting a southerly and southeasterly that's coming over land by the time it gets to Derby. There'll be a bit of acceleration in that wind field just here through the King Sound area. So there will be a bit of an acceleration once we get off onto the ocean areas. And then as we continue on, 2 p.m. 5 and 8 p.m, you can see the cyclone continues to drift southwards. Let's move back out again and let's have a look at where it goes after this. You can see no sign of it actually pushing off to off the coast of the Pilbara or anything like that, so it's not going to do any of those shenanigans. What will happen is eventually it gets caught up by an upper trough and it brings Queensland some rain as part of the upper trough. And you can see it quickly pushing eastwards towards Central Australia, and then we'll push further eastwards towards us in Queensland. So, western edge of the eye is, or the western edge of the centre, is the strongest of the rainfall potential. And then as we move down, that means Derby's going to be right in the thick of things as the cyclone passes just to their east. So Derby's going to see some of that centre. You're already starting to see some of that really strong convective southwestern quadrant. And then as we continue on, we can see that it quickly passes through. It doesn't last very long over Derby, but it is pretty sharp and strong as it pushes through. This little period here while you're southwest of the system and then west of the system, and once you're northwest of the system, she's all over, okay? So as soon as the system ducks to your south, there's a lot of upper level convergence, which we talked about in the technical update, which limits the ability for the system to provide lots of rain on its northern side. So the rain has begun. You're in this yellow area right now, and then the rain will continue and peak sometime around about the next few hours probably, and then by around about 9-10 o'clock in the morning, it should be over. Those cyclonic type conditions will head down to Willair, Roadhouse and Kimberley, and then after that point we'll move into the middle of nowhere and then continue to move into the middle of nowhere and then continue to move into the middle of nowhere. You can see if you're in Broome, Pardue, Port Hedland, all those areas, not seeing anything out of the direct circulation of this thing. There was a little bit of storm activity this morning, and there is a little bit of storm activity this morning on the peripheries. There it is there, well off the coast of Broome, and a couple of gusty showers through Broome, but that's about it. That's about the extent you're going to see. You're going to miss all of this deep, heavy convective rain. That's going to stay well to your east. For that to have impacted you, you needed the cyclone to hit somewhere around here for some of that western edge to impact you. Alrighty, so land interaction has taken place, but the environment around the cyclone remains quite favourable for further, well, not further development because it's over land, but for a maintenance of some good, decent structure all the way down through the area east of Derby and then down through this region down here. So the expectation from a wind field perspective, 2 a.m. in the morning, all the big winds are up around the northern edge of the system and through this area here on the southwestern, on the western side. The actual largest wind field is on the eastern side because obviously that wind field is coming from ocean areas. This wind field is coming from the land. So there's a little bit of a muted. So the strongest, so just be very clear here, the strongest rainfall at the moment is on the western side, but the biggest winds are the ones coming directly off the ocean, coming directly onto land like that. So you can see here gusting up to 50 to 60 knots, which is exactly what we've seen. 5 a.m. in the morning, we do see some stronger winds pushing through Derby. You can see gusts getting up to about 35 knots or so, and you can see some solid winds through Kings Sound, potentially up to about 45 knots over Kings Sound, but gusts to 35 knots over Derby, and the cyclone's held itself quite well. And you can see here it does have a slight elongated circulation, so the western edge of the circulation could be very, very close to Derby town. If you look at that, the western edge of the circulation is approximately, what's that, about 50 k's, and if you transpose that directly south, probably gets to within 20 or 30 k's of Derby on that western side. At this point in time, Derby is receiving very significant rainfall. As we go into 8 a.m, we can see the cyclone pushing the centre of the centre is probably around 50 kilometres to the east of Derby, but the edge of the centre could be, about 10, 20, 30 kilometres from the centre. So that centre may not necessarily be as tightly packed as it is there on the model. So there might be an extension westwards of the centre of the circulation. This is the time where Derby could be receiving some of its biggest winds around 8 a.m. in the morning. But the rainfall is about to settle down around 8 a.m. in the morning. So 8 a.m. is probably the last hour of very significant rainfall from the system for Derby. You can start to see these areas down around Kimberley, Willair, Roadhouse really starting to ramp up their intensity of winds. They're getting up to about 35 to 40 knots. And then as we continue southwards, the cyclone continues southwards, the winds around Derby will settle down really quickly. We're not expecting to see a lot of rain on the north side. We're not expecting to see too much wind on the north side. Sure, Kings Sound does provide these little areas of potential funneling, so you can see 25 to 30 knot winds there. But for Derby, I think they max out at about 35, maybe 40 knots at this stage with the cyclone passing just to your east. Remember, the wind field on the eastern side is biggest, but the rain field on the western side, the rain on the western edge of the core is going to be strongest. Now, eventually what happens here, by the time it gets past about Derby, it starts to produce its biggest rainfall on the southern side. So it changes a fair bit of its structure here. So a lot of its heaviest rainfall right now on the western side, and over the next few hours it'll remain on the western side. But after that it will change, sneaky little change in the structure, where it starts to develop most of its heavy rain on the south side. And you can see for places like Kimberley, you're probably getting winds gusting up to about 40, maybe even 45 knots here. So there's an opportunity for some really strong winds down there that almost get to Category 1 intensity. As we continue on, we can see the cyclone continues to track southwards, and you can see places like Fitzroy Crossing benefiting from some likely convergence as well. So right now, the rainfall around Fitzroy Crossing wouldn't be a hell of a lot, I wouldn't imagine. No. And what we will see, though, is that rainfall should increase for them as well. They won't be in the major rain spot, which is the southeastern flank of the circulation, but they'll be in a nice enough flow pattern here to drive some heavy rainfall potentially for a period. Right, you can see that our strongest wind field there is southeastern side, and our strongest rain field at the moment is the southeastern side. And you can see how well the cyclone's maintained here, right? And in fact, not only maintained, but potentially just intensified a touch while it's over land, just because of its interaction with the next upper trough. Once we get to here, the cyclone then stalls. So it stalls for a little bit, and then we'll start to move southeast. So it has a think about going west. It doesn't. Just has a think about it, and then it starts to move southeast and east-southeast. And there it goes. Off it goes by Monday. Rightio, so a period of very heavy rain is just beginning through Derby and will continue for the next few hours. By 8 a.m, we're right at the end of that period. We can see some gusty little showers on the periphery out there through Broome, and we can see that heavier rainfall coming through to Fitzroy Crossing beginning about 8 a.m. As we get through to about 11 a.m, all of the rain is done for Derby by then. Broome seeing a gusty shower possible on the western side of the circulation. Fitzroy Crossing seeing sporadic shower activity, some heavy at times at 11. At 2 p.m, we can see that the rainfall starts to change structure. In fact, we start to see that change in structure just after Derby. So at 8 a.m, we see the southwestern side packs the greatest rainfall. At 11 a.m, we see the southern side packs the greatest rainfall. At 2 p.m, we see the southeastern side packs the greatest rainfall. And at 5 p.m, we see the southeastern side well and truly now the focus of attention. Be aware, as the cyclone pushes southwards, a little scorpion's tail, which drives a fairly gusty little line of storms through Derby and Broome. That little scorpion's tail on the northwestern side of the circulation could pack a bit of a punch later on this afternoon into this evening, and we see the southeastern side then firmly the area to be in when you're looking for the strongest of the weather. You can see a couple of little lines of convection on the northern side. There's not a hell of a lot of favourable upper level ingredients out there for that northern side to fire up, so don't expect too much out of those, but a couple of little follow-up showers and sort of lines of convergence that might give us a little bit of follow-up rainfall just stuck in between Derby and the Mitchell Plateau. And then the cyclone will eventually move away from the region completely, but still, once again, there's a chance for those little gusty showers and thunderstorms on the northwestern flank on Sunday and Monday. So just a reminder, western side of the circulation, heaviest rain for the next few hours, then the southern and southeastern quadrants after the next few hours, and the strongest winds will be on the eastern side for the entire period. Eastern side turning southeastern side as the cyclone moves inland, and these are your maximum wind gusts, likely maximum wind gusts. So for Derby, you can see we're sort of maxing out at around that 50 kilometre an hour mark, maybe 60. I dare say there could be some squalls too, which could bump us up to around that 70k. So around that 40 knots would be about as high as I'd be expecting through that area. And once again, they're going to be heavily dependent on squall line activity. So if you don't get the squall line, you won't get 40 knots, you'll get 30 knots, right? And then you can see here that there's a significant amount of wind on that eastern side, and then a little bit of an intensification of the system just here where it tries to decide what it wants to do. Just to the southwest of Fitzroy Crossing, southeast of Broome. That's where it just sparks up a little bit more, and then continues to adopt a southerly and then a very sharp easterly direction, gets absorbed by the trough, and off it goes. Now, after the cyclone warning has been downgraded, we still have a severe weather warning for heavy rain and also for damaging winds potentially, or damaging wind gusts potentially, coming where that monsoon comes to the north of the system, and also for heavy rainfall and those strong winds on the southeastern quadrant of the system as it pushes inland. So it won't be a tropical cyclone at that point, but the threat of significant winds will stay. And you can see come Sunday night, there's some very good rain. See here where it starts to stall around the northern interior and the southern Kimberley, where it starts to stall there. There's a good opportunity to pick up some slightly better rainfall than even some of the coastal locations, because rather than continuing to move at, say, 15 to 20k an hour, it stalls here for a day or so, or just under a day or so, and then pushes away to the east-southeast quickly. So that stalling process can ramp up those rainfall totals over inland areas quite significantly more than what it would have done if it just kept going on its merry way. Rightio, take care, keep an eye on that radar, and as I say, the cyclone is expected to pass very, very close to Derby, just to their east at this point in time, through the next few hours. Once it is south of Derby in any way, that rainfall will weaken very, very quickly. Have a good day and stay safe.